Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. The President of the United States visited Kenosha, Wisconsin yesterday in the wake of violent riots and a city left ravaged by Marxism. And as Democratic mayors and governors continue to reject assistance from a president who obviously wants to help bring this violence to an end. Meanwhile, Joe Biden, as the president now calls him, remains bunker-bound and without the ability to criticize the violent mob. Why? Because they're his base. I remember back in 2015 and 2016, I'm sure you will too, the national media made another disgrace of itself by insisting then-candidate Trump had to distance himself from the endorsements of people like David Duke, an irrelevant figure in the grand scheme of things, but the media knew it could set up a bogeyman, and they also claimed Trump wouldn't refuse the endorsement because Duke supporters, they said, were his base. Well, that was wrong, obviously. Trump did denounce Duke, the KKK, and other historically Democrat-affiliated people and organizations, and he won the election. In other words, it wasn't his base. The media lied, quelle surprise. But they won't ask or expect of Biden a similar denouncement of the violent Marxist rioters bringing American cities, businesses, and livelihoods to a screeching halt. Why? Because those people are Biden's base. And while Biden hides in his multi-million-dollar basement, he has surrogates on national news networks making the most disgusting and reprehensible accusations of the president. It's not only cowardly, it's unmanly. Take April Ryan, for instance, the porcine fraud of a reporter who went on CNN yesterday to allege that President Trump should be brought before the International Criminal Court. Why? It's not really clear. April Ryan isn't the smartest cookie. Let's roll the clip.
April Ryan, let me start with you. I want your reaction first to what we're seeing in Portland and what we heard from the mayor.
Anna, let's call a thing a thing. This president, Donald John Trump, has instigated a race war in America. Portland, Oregon is ground zero. This president, Donald John Trump, has basically stoked the flames for racist extremists, neo-Nazis, and the alt-right. And they're even defending, this president is even defending Kyle Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old who went in Wisconsin and killed 2 protesters. So at the end of the day, the mayor of Portland is absolutely right. And there are those who are calling for help from this president in the stoking of a race war. There is a race war in America right now because of this president. People are calling me asking if there indeed is a way to get the International Crimes Court to come in to deal with this. You know, I've talked to some people who are in intelligence, and they're saying he's done heinous things, but they have to see. We don't know for sure. But people are now afraid of this president because he has stoked the racial flames. And let's call the thing a thing. He has now begun a race war in America in 2020.
I'm flabbergasted. How stupid is that woman? She starts with, let's call a thing a thing. She's talking about the International Crimes Court. No, it's the International Criminal Court. She says she's spoken to some people in intelligence. It was good because she doesn't have any herself. And did you notice the other thing I did? That Middleburg, Virginia geolocation in the corner of her screen. Middleburg, Virginia, that's in Loudoun County. WTOP reported in 2017 that Loudoun County has the highest median household income in the United States. Median annual household income in Loudoun County is $115,574. That's the median. And the median home value, $710,645. The rest of Virginia sits at a more healthy $310,000, and the median home price across the nation is between $200,000 and $300,000. Nice house, April Ryan. And while I'm obviously no class warrior mad at somebody like April Ryan for making money, I am actually mad about the way she makes her money. She's a grifter, or to be more specific, a race grifter. April Ryan's job is to make other people's lives more difficult by doing precisely what she accuses the president of: fomenting unrest, creating a culture of hate and guilt and division, sowing discontent, and stabbing at the heart of American patriotism. April Ryan is a race grifter and a radicalizer. And what's all this about calling in a foreign court to haul your political opponents to jail? Doesn't sound very democratic, does it? Almost sounds authoritarian and fascistic. That's because it is. April Ryan is a race grifter, a radicalizer, and a fascist. And meanwhile, we're supposed to sit in those airport lounges with CNN on the screens and think that's all fine, that's a free speech, that's just what she's paid to say. By the way, turn those TVs off. When you go to those airport lounges, just go and turn the TVs off. It has real world implications for the rest of us. What she's out there saying, it was just days ago that ordinary people in DC were woken in the night by marchers screaming, if we don't get no justice, you don't get no sleep. It's just days ago that business owners in Kenosha or in Portland were left with nothing, sometimes for their whole life's work, because April Ryan wants to make her next mortgage payment on her expensive house. And who ultimately has to pay? You. But the financial burden of all of us shouldn't have to be carried by the American public. Not anymore. Not according to one congressman, Jim Banks. He's the representative for the 3rd Congressional District of Indiana, and Banks said it's about time rioters, the mob, were held accountable for their actions financially. I agree. The Support Peaceful Protest Act would hold rioters and looters accountable for the damage they cause by withholding government unemployment benefits. It's a great start. If you want to burn this country down, you don't get a check from this country. If you want to destroy public and private property, then the public won't bail you out. Congressman Jim Banks will join us on the show today to discuss his bill and his plan to hold these thugs accountable. And I'll ask him about April Ryan, the next steps for the president, and the Transition Integrity Project trying to bolster the left's claims to the Oval Office, no matter what the result. This is the National Pulse, and we'll be right back. Well, welcome back to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, and I want to take a moment to thank the President of the United States. There on your screens you see the President retweeted me quite a bit last night, especially as it pertains to a lot of this Democrat finagling around the election, the mail-in ballots, the Transition Integrity Project. If you're an avid watcher of this show, you'll know what we're talking about. But if you're not, never fear. If you're new to the program as a result of the President's retweets, then welcome and thank you for joining us here. You'll hear all about it because I'm not going to stop banging on about this for the next coming months. It's everything as far as I'm concerned. How they're trying to rig this election. They're being very overt and open about it as well, and our side is on the back foot as usual, quite frankly, but we'll see if we can play some catch up. My guest now is Congressman Jim Banks, Indiana 2nd, 3rd District, and we're very grateful to have him here on the program with us. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you.
Congressman, you authored this bill, short and sweet though it is. It's incredibly impactful and has raised the eyebrows of many on the left. I hear somebody asked you if you were a racist as a result of this bill. But what this bill does, in fact, you just explained to us, what this bill does is holds people to account, and we've got it up on the screen there, holds people to account for what they've been doing in major American cities. Congressman, just explain it to us.
Well, Raheem, what I hear over and over again from my constituents, really from people all over the country, is we go to work every day, we pay our taxes, we raise our families, we focus on our communities, and then what we watch on the news every night is the destruction of public property, the cities in America being burned to the ground by thugs, protesting and rioting in the streets. And I think what made my bill so unique, why I got so much attention, is that we're not seeing enough leadership in America today from the top down of our leaders in Congress, our leaders at the local level, to try to bring this madness to an end and stop these mobs from causing so much destruction and violence on a daily basis. So that's why I introduced the bill on Friday. I was at the White House for the president's historic speech on Thursday night for the Republican convention. And when I left the White House, everyone who was there got a taste of what these politically motivated violent mobs are up to and targeting Donald Trump supporters as they were leaving the White House. And that's what my bill is about, is saying that if you break the law, if you're arrested and found guilty, then you'll lose your enhanced federal unemployment benefits as a consequence to your actions.
Let me ask you this question, because obviously there are a lot of benefits floating around at the moment, and I think we just saw the latest numbers pop this afternoon of the U.S. budget deficit absolutely soaring right now, and I think most Americans will be delighted to hear that you're working on a way to hold people to account while they're taking government money. They're effectively being subsidized to riot, these people. They're being subsidized to loot and subsidized to tear American cities down. But the point I made in the introduction of all of this was, you want to tear the country down, then you ain't going to get a check from the country anymore. That's as simple as that. Congressman, why not more of the benefits? Why just the COVID-related benefits?
This is where we started, and we found that with the enhanced unemployment benefits that were brought about through the CARES Act and other coronavirus aid packages, that's a good place to start. I'm certainly not against looking for other avenues to stiffen the penalties for these types of violent actions that are happening on a daily basis. But that's where we started, Raheem. I mean, there might be another way to handle this that we'll look at in the future. But I'm reminded of the president's remarks on Thursday night. He talked about what happened when he signed the executive order instituting a 10-year prison term on those who were tearing down statues a couple of months ago. The president, in his own way, sort of chuckled and said, as soon as he signed that executive order, you didn't see any statues torn down anymore after that. And in the same way, my bill seeks to be a deterrent to prevent those thugs who are showing up every day and harassing people, assaulting people on the streets, and causing destruction of public property. I hope just by the mere fact of, or the mere threat of introducing this bill, it'll cause many of them to think twice.
It's a really great point you make there, actually. I didn't even pay it that much attention while it's been happening the last couple of weeks, but suddenly you're not seeing people targeting statues, and it's probably absolutely a direct link to the executive order that threatened a 10-year prison sentence for people who did. But they are tearing other things down, and you mentioned that you were at the White House for that historic speech. I'm very envious of that. It looked absolutely amazing, but what happened outside didn't look so amazing. Were you caught up in any of that, Congressman?
Well, we certainly saw it. By the time I left the White House, we went out at a different gate because they blocked the gate that we all came into at the beginning of the night. But there are a couple of well-known videos. I'm sure you saw the video of Rand Paul and his wife Kelly, who were harassed when they left the White House. There's another video of my colleague Brian Mast from Florida, who, by the way, lost both of his legs in Afghanistan, who was being shouted at and cursed at as he left the White House. A lot of irony in that he served and lost his legs to protect the freedoms that we enjoy to peacefully protest. But there's a third video that gained a lot of attention. It's of an older couple who left the gates of the White House after the president's speech, and an Antifa thug jumped in their face with both of his middle fingers pointed out at the poor lady. I happen to know the couple. They come from my district. They came to Washington to hear a president who they love give a historic speech, and the night ended in a memorable way, but not in the one that they imagined. Myself and Senator Paul and other members of Congress, we have Capitol Police protections. But when innocent people come to Washington, D.C. to hear a speech at the White House and then are targeted when they leave just because they support Donald Trump, there's something wrong with that. And there's something that we need to do more to bring this type of mob violence to an end in America. And that's why I introduced the bill that I did.
It's incredible, and we've got it up on the screens as well. We'll have it up when we come back as well. We're going to go to a quick break. Congressman Jim Banks joining us down the line currently. We're very grateful for his time. Congressman, just hang about. I want to ask you more about the RNC, about this latest polling, which is starting to show Joe Biden slipping, and about the potential use of the Insurrection Act here. I know you've got your views, I've got mine. We'll talk about it when we come back in just a moment. Well, welcome back to the National Pulse, although I suspect that for some people we didn't go anywhere. Getting a few text messages telling me I can still hear you in the break. Well, we'll clear up those technical errors. I hope I didn't say anything too crazy in that break. I'm not sure I do. I'm just a normal, nice guy. I'm Raheem Kassam, Editor-in-Chief of the National Pulse, and our Congressman for the day is Jim Banks. Jim Banks of Indiana, just a fabulous guy when you look at his record, when you look at what he's done in his life, serving his country currently again in a political sense here, and really getting to the nitty-gritty of how these rioters, these looters, these thugs need to be treated as a result of their just depraved behavior, putting people out of businesses they built their entire lives. And Congressman Banks has a plan to withhold the coronavirus-related unemployment benefits from these thugs. We heard about that in the last segment. If you missed it, make sure you go back. Make sure you're sharing everything on social media. Jim Banks' social media is super hot right now, I'm told, Congressman. You gained like 2,500 followers overnight. Wasn't that a nice little trick?
Yes, amazing, and much thanks to you for making that happen. We gained over 3,000 followers overnight, and it was because of a retweet and a mention.
I don't have the guest in my ear. We may have a technical difficulty with the congressman. We're working on that. We'll bring Congressman Jim Banks back in just a second, clearing up something to do with the audio here. We will get to another bill as well that Congressman Banks brought up a couple of months ago, which was the reparations from China bill. We all know where this virus came from. We all know the damage it's caused to the economy, the damage it's caused to people's livelihoods, the damage it's causing to the nation's psyche, and this mass hysteria and mass psychosis that we're seeing in amongst the thugs and the looters and the rioters and the political hard left. And it came from China. This started in China, and China didn't allow the World Health Organization, even an organization that they've even got in their back pockets, to investigate what had taken place in China, whether it was in the lab, whether it was in the wet market. External observers were not allowed. We didn't get the code, the original code of the virus, as Mike Pompeo said, the Secretary of State, noting just a couple of weeks later, after it started to hit the United States, that how could we possibly be responsive without knowing what they know? And now the Chinese, of course, claiming to have a vaccine ready and so many other things. Well, who's going to pay for all of this damage that was caused from this cover-up by the Chinese Communist Party? We hope that we can reconnect with Congressman Jim Banks in a moment to let us know what the latest status is on his reparations from China Act. Also want to ask Congressman Banks about the latest polling. I don't know if any of you have seen this yet, but just today, the Monmouth poll is showing that Joe Biden is slipping in areas that he thought he was doing particularly well in. 13 points up. Originally in Pennsylvania, that lead has now been slashed, I think, to 3 or 4 points. And that follows on from the DNC and the RNC. And what did I say back then? I said that the DNC was small, it was petty, it was weak, it was pandering, it looked cheap, it looked tacky. They didn't try to speak to anyone but themselves. All of those panels that they had and the Zoom meetings all day long, where they left out under God, from one nation under God. And then the RNC. The glitz, the glamour, the hype, the power, the gravitas. And of course, along with it came that big polling bump. And we're now seeing the back of that polling bump now, and the Monmouth poll out today proves it. I think we're going to go to a quick break now here on America's Voice. I'm Raheem Kassam. This is the National Pulse, and we'll be back with you in just a moment. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I think we've got our connection with Congressman Banks back. I want to bring Congressman Banks right back into the show. Congressman, you could hear me, but I couldn't hear you. So the floor is yours. I want you to respond to some of the things I said there. Specifically, why don't we start with China? Who is going to hold China accountable? How is China going to pay? I think we heard some extraordinary things from the Secretary of State this morning. Congressman, over to you.
Well, first and foremost, Raheem, this is the first president and administration in my lifetime to do anything remotely close to holding China accountable. Sadly, that's not matched in the Congress, especially the Democrat-led House. The good news, though, is that the China task force, which I'm a part of, that Kevin McCarthy created a few months ago, by October 1st, we will release an extensive report to the Congress and to the American people that will put forth an agenda for a whole of government approach of how we can combat the China threat. Now, what's remarkable about this effort is it is entirely partisan. Sadly, the Democrat Party would not join us in addressing the greatest threat that America faces today in participating in this report. It's baffling to me because I know a number of Democrat House members who share this sincere belief that we need to do more to rise up in many ways to confront China, yet they've been held completely silent by House Democrat leadership who told them not to participate. But watch, by October 1st, this report will come out, and look forward to having a chance to talk to you more about the findings of that report when it does.
Yeah, well, we really look forward to it. I mean, I think a lot of people out there just seeing all the injustice that's going on around the world right now, whether it's their businesses being burned down or whether it's Nancy Pelosi going to get her hair blown out, but nobody else can go to the hairdresser or the salons or anything like that. And I think people want answers. They want answers on a micro level. They want answers on a macro level. How long is this going to last? How long is the impact of all of this going to last? How long are we going to be expected to wear masks everywhere we go? How long are we going to be expected to socially distance? How long are we going to be told off by people in the street for not abiding by these silly little rules that we keep getting thrown different rules at every so often? So, Congressman, we're very keen to hear back from you on that. And of course, it's an open offer to come back on the show whenever you want to discuss the progress there. I wanted to ask you about this polling situation. Now, I've looked into the crosstabs on a lot of these polls, and I've noticed that, of course, just like 2016, there's a great deal of oversampling of the left going on, a great deal of oversampling of Democrats going on. But even when you take that into account, Congressman, it looks pretty bad for Biden right now. The slip on the new Monmouth poll, I think it's a sign of things to come, as people realize that this man is barely leaving his bunker in his basement right now. He's barely coherent when he does so. I mean, at this point in time, I think it's elder abuse, Congressman. What say you?
Well, it's the biggest and maybe the most absurd political juxtaposition I've ever seen. You have President Trump, who's rebuilding the economy, opening the economy back up, getting the American people back to work. And then you have Joe Biden, who made a pledge that what's the first thing that at the convention, he said the first thing that he would do as president is to shut America back down. And that's what's at stake on the November ballot. I'm not at all surprised that these polling numbers are shifting in President Trump's favor because of that, because the Republican convention was so much of a home run. In so many ways, it struck a chord with the American people in a way that the Democrat convention failed to do. And I think also, Raheem, when history goes back and looks at this presidential election, the peace deal in the Middle East that President Trump historically constructed is going to be, I really believe history is going to judge it as a defining moment in this election that showed once again, when America needed to be reminded of it, once again, that President Trump is the adult in the room. He's a results-driven president. He gets things done. And they know that if Joe Biden were president, he would be asleep at the wheel. And that's what's at stake in November. And that's why the numbers are shifting in such a dramatic way toward President Trump's favor. Wouldn't at all be surprised if President Trump doesn't win his reelection by a landslide on election night.
Well, I want to get into that because yesterday Hawkfish, this DNC analytics firm, came out and said that actually, yes, they do believe that President Trump will win in a landslide on election night, which is a strange thing for DNC operatives to admit. But there was a but, and the but was that over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 days after the election and after election night, that results would come in, mail-in ballot results would come in, and slowly but surely they would eat away at the legitimacy, the electoral legitimacy of this president. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that report out of that group yet, Congressman, but I'm sure you will have seen some of the reporting. The President of the United States retweeted our report on the National Pulse about it just this morning with the question, is this election, is this fraud that's going to be taking place? I want to get your response on that, because I do think our side is on the back foot here.
Yeah, and we need to be prepared. When I saw the first reportings of this yesterday morning in Axios of the so-called red mirage that the Democrats that these operatives are starting to lay the groundwork for, this was very scary and concerning to me, because this tells you right now that Democrats do expect Donald Trump to win the re-election, and that they're going to fight to overturn the election in the days following through other measures. So we have to be prepared for it, and I'm glad that President Trump has taken an interest in this subject because of your work, and I, the tweets that he retweeted last night. The president is obviously fully aware of what these Democrat operatives are up to, and how they might attempt to lay the groundwork to diminish the results on election night. So I have a lot more to read as far as the report goes, but it should be concerning when you read about the funding for this effort, and then look at the names of who are involved in this effort as well. This should be concerning to every, not just every Republican, but every American who's concerned about election security and the integrity of the 2020 elections.
And we've got a lot more reporting, by the way, that we're going to be popping in the next few days with Natalie Winters and myself, going through a lot of these groups, who they are, who's backing them. I mean, this Hawkfish group is Bloomberg. That's Bloomberg funded. They admit it up front. Michael Bloomberg is our benefactor. This other one, the Transition Integrity Project, that's backed by the Soros Institute and the Bagruin Institute. The Bagruin Institute being a Chinese Communist Party linked organization. And again, they're not even hiding these things anymore, Congressman. It's up in your face. And my worry is that our side doesn't have a response. One of the things I've been hearing this morning from people as a result, direct result of National Pulse reporting into this, is that the Republicans should come up with one of these committees, one of these boards, one of these groups themselves, Election Integrity Committee or something similar. Would that be something that you might want to be involved with?
Yeah, this election is so important to the future of our country, and we know the tactics of the left. We know what they will do, how far they will go, how low they will stoop to diminish the election, just like they sought to overturn the election results and diminish the integrity of the election in 2016. We know they're going to go even further to block Donald Trump from getting reelected and having another 4 years. That's important to the heart and soul and future of our country. And of course, if something like that is put together, I would very much like to participate in whatever way that I can.
Well, Congressman, we're incredibly grateful for your time. We know you've got to bounce, you're a busy man, and you've been very generous with us. So I just want to say thank you once again, Congressman Jim Banks. Just tell the audience where they can follow all your work and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, first and foremost, find us on Twitter at Rep Jim Banks, Congressman Jim Banks on Facebook. We appreciate your feedback and joining us in the conversation on both of those platforms. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Congressman, thank you so much. And of course, we really want the audience to go and make sure you're following people like Jim Banks. He's a real hero and a real fighter and a real profile in courage. I want to turn now to Natalie Winters, our senior reporter at the National Pulse. You look surprised. You didn't think I wanted your analysis or something? The China thing specifically is something that I think a lot of people are waiting on. Well, what is going to happen? What are we going to see? But there were some pretty strong words from the Secretary of State this morning. Mike Pompeo actually went out there and he was talking about universities and getting universities off the Chinese Communist Party teat. And they are very much so reliant upon China. Just tell us a little bit. I know we haven't gone through everything yet. We're a limited team here at the National Pulse, and by the way, we're very grateful for everybody who supports our work at thenationalpulse.com/support. It allows us to do much more investigative work. It allows us to have more strength in depth to our site and our staffing of the site. So we're really grateful for all the people who joined as a result overnight of the president's retweet of us. But Natalie, we've got about a minute left in this segment, and then we'll come and talk about it more. But this reparations from China thing, how important is this?
Super important. As you outlined in the previous segment, the Chinese Communist Party is obviously responsible for the coronavirus, but you also hit on a very important speech that was also delivered by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo earlier today about the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party on our universities. And I really think that this is an important issue because these universities, like the Harvard Center, the Harvard Ash Center, which we've covered at the National Pulse, which is literally funded by the Chinese Communist Party itself, these are the institutions that are churning out the leaders who are going to become our next congressmen, our next senators, even perhaps our next president. So if they're understanding China the way that the Chinese Communist Party wants them to, that's definitely concerning. And like Representative Banks said, you're only going to see Republicans on these committees really keen on holding the Chinese Communist Party accountable, not just for coronavirus, but for the years of economic and information warfare that they've waged on America.
Well, Natalie's been digging, and this time she's been digging into Ted Wheeler in Portland and what his connections are. Ted Wheeler refused the assistance of the U.S. federal government, refused the assistance of President Donald J. Trump to bring law and order to a city, but he does seem to want the assistance of one group. It's the Chinese Communist Party. We'll tell you more about it when we come back from this break. Oh, I was just doing my Natalie Winters impression of when I go to her for analysis. She goes like that, sits up in the chair. Welcome back to the National Pulse. We're grateful to have you with us. If you're a new viewer, thank you for taking the time and checking us out. We hope you enjoy the content of this show, which is live 3 p.m. every day. I say every day, most days when the president isn't speaking. The president obviously coming in over us yesterday, and we were very grateful for it in the end because he made it up to us with 5 retweets of National Pulse content from yesterday, including one of the segments of our interviews with Nigel Farage from last week, where Nigel warned on this show that some dirty deeds were going to be played as a result of the Democrats using mail-in ballots at the election. And why wasn't he right? We heard yesterday from the Democrats themselves how they intend to overrule the election. And we heard today, we're hearing it all over the place today, the chatter in DC is that there isn't going to be an election night call from the networks. They're not going to call it in favor of one candidate or another. In other words, they've just thrown every single electoral norm in the United States out of the window, and they're claiming that President Trump does that. They're claiming that President Trump attacks the institutions. They're saying no AP call, no CNN call. Wolf Blitzer will not be reading out the results on election night. Election night is dead. Election night, they say in this report, and this is my new favorite thing, it goes everywhere with me, and we're going to publish it soon on the National Pulse. I know I said it yesterday, but we're being comprehensive. The concept of election night is no longer accurate and is indeed dangerous, says the Transition Integrity Project. These are the people who claim that they're in favor of protecting democratic norms in the United States. They say, quote, they recognize and share the view that the Electoral College is profoundly anti-democratic and that numerous long-standing practices also function to create structural biases in our voting system. There is a coup going on right now in front of our very eyes, and we are not armed to fight back right now. And here's the thing. There is this amazing historical precedent for all of this that they're talking about, and they are upfront about it in the report as well. They talk about 1876. But what happened in 1876 was that you had a committee that came together. I think it was 7 Republicans, 7 Democrats, and 1 independent, except the independent dropped out and was replaced by a Republican. That committee eventually decided, go back and read about it yourself, there's some great articles out there about it. But that committee decided who the President of the United States was going to be. Not the public, not the people, not the Electoral College. The Constitution had no remedy for the situation they found themselves in. And these people, they're saying openly right here, right where my finger is, right on this piece of paper, they are saying that they do not intend to acknowledge that there will be a president after November the 3rd, and that 1876 they're pointing at as the model for what can happen here. Our side needs its own election integrity project, and I'll be speaking to people later on today about how that process is coming together, and it has to come together very quickly. And if you're watching this clip, whether it's online, whether it's on the Pluto app, the Roku app for your TVs, wherever it is, grab this clip, grab this segment, and send it to your lawmakers, send it to your legislators, send it to local, send it to national, send it to the International Crime Court, as far as April Ryan calls it, send it to the President of the United States, because he has to know and has to understand the deviousness with which they're not trying to win this election. They're not trying to make Joe Biden win this election fair and square on November the 3rd. They don't care. They don't care about the election. They care about what they can do with the mail-in ballots fraudulently in the next few days after this election. That is clear. They have said it. They have acknowledged it, and we're doing nothing about it yet. Well, we will keep pushing on that issue here on the National Pulse. I want to turn now to Natalie Winters. We've got a couple of minutes left in this segment because I just went on an impromptu tirade. We've got a couple of minutes left here, but you have a great story doing great traffic on the National Pulse right now. It's about Ted Wheeler?
Yes, but before I get into that, a story that we had published a few months ago, I actually tweeted it out today because I think it's become even more relevant. But Chinese state-run media has actually endorsed the mail-in ballot process, absentee ballots, penning an article that, quote, "The denial of absentee ballots is a denial of democracy." Again, extolling the process and slamming President Trump, which they like to do quite often. Over the past week, I think I've seen 3 op-eds where they outright call for a victory coming from the Joe Biden campaign.
Look, I don't think anybody's against absentee voting. You know, if you're abroad, if you're away, if you're unwell, if you're unable to get to the polls for legitimate reasons. It's this mass mail-in voting thing where, oh, it's not safe to go to the polls, but it's safe to be 50 deep in Walmart right now. AMC Theaters is opening 120 new theaters around the country, they announced today, stock price going up. So all of these things are absolutely fine.
Exactly.
But voting isn't. The single most important thing that a citizen can do is not safe, in their words.
Yeah, and they accuse President Trump of weaponizing the issue of universal mail-in voting, but in reality, you see the Democrats and their, as Nigel Farage says, dark art operatives really keen on politicizing and weaponizing and using mail-in ballots to secure a victory for Biden when the supposed red mirage that DNC data firm you were talking about dissipates, and over the next week, come after November 3rd, suddenly all these ballots are discovered with Joe Biden checked as the candidate that said voter prefers.
Well, Nigel knows a thing or two about those dark arts that are used by the Democrats, because actually, and again, we're not on script here, right? We're totally off our show clock. But it's very important that we have this conversation, because a lot of people won't know that it was Jim Messina, who was Obama's original campaign advisor, who went over to the Rochester and Stroud by-election, a special election in the United Kingdom back in late 2014, I believe it was, when a Conservative member of Parliament left the party and joined the UK Independence Party, the real right-wing party as it was back then in the United Kingdom. And the Obama camp sent Jim Messina over to run the Conservative Party's election against their old guy who is now running under UKIP. You with me?
Yes.
He lost. The Tory party lost. UKIP won. Mark Reckless won. And here's the thing. I bumped into Jim Messina a couple of years later out on a terrace here in DC that will remain nameless. And I said to him, "We beat you in Rochester." And he looked back at me and he sneered in my face. He said, "I never went there." I said, "That's the point. That's the point. You think you're too big for Rochester. You think you're too big for these flyover areas, whether it's in the United Kingdom or in the United States." I said, "We beat you because of that attitude." And you're gloating about it. They're still gloating about it. All right, we've got to go to break. We've just blown through this whole extemporaneous segment again. We've got to come back and break your news here about Ted Wheeler in Portland and the mayor and what he's doing with the Chinese Communist Party. I want to make sure that everyone out there, you're following the National Pulse, whether it's Twitter, on Parler, on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing on YouTube. It's free. We get all the clips from the shows up there. We'll be right back, I swear, with Natalie Story after this break. A miracle has happened. Joe Biden took press questions today. And if you go online, as I did in the break there, and look at what the kind of questions were, they were very hand-picked by his staff, I'm sure. But one of the real reporters in the room managed to get a real question in at Joe Biden and fundamentally embarrassed him. We'll make sure we cover that on the show tomorrow in full. It's a long clip, so we couldn't really play it in this segment, but we will come back in with that tomorrow. We're talking about if Joe Biden knew, as he says he knew, that there was a pandemic coming back in January, why was he still holding campaign rallies into March? Good question. We'll get to that tomorrow at 3 p.m. here on the National Pulse. I want to turn now to Natalie Winters. Natalie, we are going to talk about, you thought I really was going to go off there, didn't you? We are going to get into this story. Tell us about this story, because it's doing huge numbers right now. Get a link from all the great aggregators, Citizen Free Press and the Bongino Report and all those guys. Tell us.
So as we know, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler denied President Trump's offer of federal law enforcement to come in, help restore order. Again, we've seen small businesses in Portland totally collapse. We've even seen Americans lose their lives on the streets of the city. Most recently, Jay Bishop, who appears to have been targeted because he was a supporter of the president. Both of those disasters ostensibly could have been avoided had Mayor Wheeler accepted President Trump's offer for federal assistance. But Mayor Wheeler has no reservations about collaborating with the Chinese Communist Party. The story we have up on the site today, I've listed over 5 instances where Mayor Wheeler has collaborated with the Chinese Communist Party. For example, a Chinese consulate general came overseas. He visited the state of Oregon. Specifically, he wanted to go visit Portland. There he gave a speech about the Belt and Road Initiative. So most Americans probably aren't familiar with the Belt and Road Initiative, but it's basically the Chinese Communist Party's scheme to, I don't want to sound dramatic, but enslave basically the developing world to be dependent on them financially, politically, economically, and they do this by giving out loans to certain countries.
It's neocolonialism.
Exactly. They give out loans, infrastructure projects are built, suddenly the countries can't pay it back, and all of a sudden China acquires the project rights and oftentimes a lot more.
Industries.
Exactly. So this Chinese Communist Party official came to Portland, spoke at the city's university club, where he extolled the merits of the Belt and Road Initiative and actually implored Portland to take part in the Belt and Road Initiative. And Mayor Wheeler's constituents welcomed him with open arms, and Mayor Wheeler actually met with this same individual, talking about how he looked forward to, quote, deepening ties with the Chinese Communist Party. And in 2018, Mayor Wheeler actually led a delegation of 30 individuals, including other members from Portland city government, to go and visit China to commemorate the 30-year anniversary of what's called a sister city relationship, which the city of Portland boasts with Chinese city Suzhou. So when overseas, they planted a commemorative tree and I believe a rose bush as well, and Chinese state media was all over it. They produced several clips showing, look at this Portland mayor, look at this American official who wants to collaborate with the Chinese Communist Party.
They're laundering legitimacy through the American democratic process, effectively.
And to further that, a few months later, a delegation of Chinese Communist Party officials came and visited Portland, where they again planted another tree and another rose bush, and that ceremony was similarly popularized by Chinese state media. But Mayor...
Let me just jump in here, because I want people to really understand this. You're not talking about Chinese people, right?
No.
We're not talking about the ordinary people of China. These are Chinese Communist Party officials. These are the bad guys. These are the ones who are enslaving people. These are the ones who are oppressing people. These are the ones who we've got wigs being made of Uyghur hair that are coming out of China. These are the people who are allowing for thousands upon thousands of weapons parts to make their way. These are the people who are taking American jobs away.
And perhaps interfering in the protests and riots that we see going on as the and the election, as the FBI and other government bodies have said. But he also, in addition to liaising with party members themselves, he also collaborates with the organizations and the institutions that help to prop up the Chinese Communist Party. For example, in collaboration with a communist youth league operating out of Suzhou, he held a poster contest, which again sounds innocent enough, but you see pictures pictures where he signed letters congratulating individuals who had made posters, and you see the hammer and sickle on the stamps that were used to put on these letters. Even he spoke, delivered the opening keynote at a gala in which the local Confucius Institute, which, as we know, as identified by our FBI and DOJ, launder Chinese Communist Party propaganda, are rife with espionage and intellectual property. He gave the opening keynote at a gala which honored Portland's local Confucius Institute.
That's incredible. I know we're going to get some of the pictures up on the screen in a minute for the audience of the stuff that's coming out of your reporting. We've got about 2 minutes here, Natalie. What else should people know about Ted Wheeler's dealings with the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, I think what you're seeing is that on the streets of Portland, his inability to really get tough with the Chinese Communist Party, whether with regards to coronavirus or with regards to their involvement in these riots. Again, as we highlighted yesterday on this segment, the Chinese Communist Party has been funneling in weapons, even seeds, weapons parts, gun silencers, gun suppressors. Well, it's really hard to crack down on the Chinese Communist Party when you're overseas visiting China, when you're inviting delegates to come and visit your city, to come and address your constituents. There's realistically no way you can get tough on China like Representative Jim Banks was outlining, right? You're not going to see any legislation coming out of the city of Portland cracking down on the Chinese Communist Party, who's intent on sowing discord in the streets of Portland. CGTN, that same network that we have covered extensively, again, is entirely funded and administered by the Chinese Communist Party. They have press passes to be covering the riots that are going on in Portland.
Natalie, where can people follow you, find more of your work?
I'm on Twitter at Natalie G. Winters.
Make sure you're following Natalie, and make sure you're following at the Nat Pulse on Twitter, the National Pulse on Parler, the National Pulse on Facebook. Turn your notifications on so that you get all the breaking news from us. We're not one of those organizations that blasts news out every 2 minutes, so you won't get a whole load in a given day. You will get the news that you won't get anywhere else, and the investigations that you don't see anywhere else. That's what we do here at the National Pulse. We do the digging, we watch the watchers, and we slam mugs down on the table during live shows. Thank you, Natalie Winters, for that. I'm very grateful for everybody who's joined in to support us over the last couple of days. And as you know, or you should know, we read out some of the names of our supporters who want their names read out on the show every Friday. So if you want to get in on that, make sure you're heading over to thenationalpulse.com/support. Very grateful to the President of the United States for all those retweets yesterday. We're going to have a lot more for him to retweet as the day goes on. We'll be releasing much more information about the Democrats and their dodgy process, their dark arts process to rig this election. We'll see you again tomorrow at 3 p.m.